10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn.
Ora pawb, croeso i Abertawe, and everyone, welcome to Swansea, the Twilight Show. Tonight, we're going to be joined by James Pearce, and we're going to be talking about his upcoming book, Do You Want to Share That With the Class? It's hilarious anecdotes and honest advice for primary ECTs. Welcome to the show. Let's get going. Tune in, talk it out. Off we go.
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Ora pawb, croeso i Abertawe. Hello everyone, welcome to Swansea. It's autumn term, like it really is. It was hammering with rain as I came out of school today. Went to the car park. I have to walk across the car park to sign out, then walk back to my car. So it was one of those things, and hammering rain. Now, as I said, tonight we're joined by James Pearce. Now, James, I think I can see you in the studio there. If you want to hit that call in button, we'll get you connected, because I have so many questions about the book. So many things. And as I said in the introduction, this is a book called Do You Want to Share That With the Class? It is anecdotes, advice, heavy on the advice, I should say. If you're looking for some top tips, this is the place to go. But before we get started, James, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are coming through loud and clear. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Before I've done a little bit of spiel there at the start, just whet everyone's appetite, anyone listening live now, anyone downloading this as a podcast, just to get them started. But before we get started, we need to find out a little bit about you. So, set the scene for our listeners. Who are you? What do you currently do?
So nowadays I've got quite a nice job within education, because I've actually become a supply teacher, which wasn't really the direction where I expected things to go. I was full-time teaching for 8 years, and I thought, you know what, I've been in one school ever since I trained, and I wanted to see a bit more out and about and see a lot more other schools. So I've been a supply teacher on and off for the last 2 years. Did a placement in a school last year for a couple of terms, and ended up doing a lot of roles there. So yeah, for me at the moment, I've got that fantastic job. Yes, we sort of, when I was full-time, we always joked about the fact that supply teachers don't have to go for the meetings and don't have to deal with parents' evenings and things like that. But actually, it's so eye-opening for me to be going into different schools, seeing how they all look at the national curriculum, how they sort of take the guidance from the DFE, and how schools do things by themselves. And it gave me the chance to meet a lot of ECTs and teachers to be as well. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment, sort of enjoying the life of flexibility. And it really is. We say teaching's different than every single day. As a supply teacher, it really, really is.
Yeah, I do think, this, maybe it's post-pandemic. There have been some great shows on this. If you're listening to us and you haven't listened to early in the week, go back and find it. I know Tom Rogers did a show talking about, whether or not people should quit teaching entirely. But as part of that, they were talking about, these other options, the fact that maybe we're looking at teaching a bit broader now, and, doing supply, changing up contracts, chopping and changing. It seems to be a lot more common now, post-pandemic maybe.
I think it is. For me, I came into the profession. I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and I did a BA degree, did the 3 years of teacher training at Kingston University. And so for me, when I came out of university and I stepped into the classroom for the full time, I knew that this was something that I was going to be doing for a long time. It's what I put my passion into. But more and more, and I always use the anecdote of my first placement class that I worked in back in 2011. The teacher that I was with, she got her 25 years of service award, which is, a huge accolade and achievement, particularly back then, but even more so now. And it occurred to me that when I stepped into the classroom at the age of 22, By the time I get to retirement age, it's probably going to be, 70, 72, whatever. I don't think anybody can do 50 years of full-time teaching on the front line nowadays. I think, that's impossible with the way that the profession's gone. But the great thing about teaching is the fact there are those different elements. So you can be a supply teacher, you can be a leader of learning, there's still enough in there that you can stay in the classroom but have different roles to keep you challenged, to keep you satisfied, and to keep you happy in what we do.
Oh, definitely. I find it, as I say, I find this, you've brought it up now, and, we are talking about ECTs. I want to rewind, flashback. I want to talk James, the, NQT, I imagine we were back then.
Yeah.
I will say I'll share some honest reflections. Don't feel put on the spot, that I'm, going to embarrass. I will share, I have incredibly embarrassing and traumatic moments in my early career. But tell me about, what was James like? What were you like as a new teacher coming into the classroom?
I think it feels like a long time ago. It's my 11th year in the classrooms now. No, I was definitely one of those, the try hard NQTs, where when I got into the classroom, the first mistake that I made is I thought that teaching was the be all and end all, and I threw myself into the job and the profession. And it took me time to find that balance and realize that actually that work and teaching doesn't have to be everything about you. And as soon as I sort of made that mistake, and I think, many NQTs or ECTs now, you get to this time of year, that autumn one, half term at the end of it, and you just feel exhausted. I think when I went back in autumn too, I had a completely different perspective on it. And that's when I started to find the fun in the job. I realized that actually being my best is never going to be perfection, and that's okay as long as the children are going home. My motto has always been, as long as the children go home with a smile on their face, with a new bit of knowledge, and they feel happy and ready to come back the next day, I'm happy with that. That's my mentality. But at the same time, I definitely wanted to go in and have some fun doing it as well, because there is no point going and trying to make a difference if you're going to be boring. So yeah, I went in really trying to throw myself into the job and to do the best that I could. I think all of us as teachers, we are perfectionists. We're all very hard on ourselves. We're all very self-critical. And that, even now, 11 years on, that's still definitely me. I always come away from every day thinking, oh, could have done that better. Or, shouldn't have made that mistake. Or, as you said, we all have those embarrassing moments where you say the wrong thing, you do the wrong thing, and you're left feeling a bit red-faced. But yeah, for me, I always, when I have those moments, try to learn from them, and yeah, just trying to have positivity with it. And now, when sorry, as a newly qualified teacher as well, obviously I didn't have the opportunity to sort of work and mentor others. So back then I was really one of those that tried to be a sponge. I love learning new things. So I went into the classroom and into school thinking, actually, any new skill or role or anything I can pick up, that for me was great. As I said, I sort of overloaded myself at the beginning, if I'm absolutely honest, and that was something I had to find the balance of. But yeah, any opportunities, I was like, yeah, I'll go and get involved with this club, or I'll help at this trip and this, that, and the other, because I just wanted to get stuck in.
Yeah, there's an interesting part you said there about, the perfection thing. I think I suffered from that. Like I was one of those newly qualified teachers, or early career teachers who like I wanted. This is back when grades were a thing as well. Admittedly, I wanted outstanding lesson observations. And
Oh
I
yeah.
beat myself up if I didn't get it perfect, and that
Mm.
was a really hard lesson for me to learn over a number of years. That sometimes good enough is good for, like you say, like leaving the so I think that was a really tough one for me. But I guess I'm maybe unlike you more, and this is where I find your book, I think, would be really helpful to someone like me when I was in my career. Is I was a bit isolated, maybe. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was the only NQT at my school when I did my NQT year.
Mm.
So I was the only one who knew nothing, and also I didn't know what I didn't know, and there weren't
Yeah.
other people going through it, and I found that really, really hard.
It's so tough, and you're right. I've seen ECTs, and I've worked with ECTs in the last couple of years that have gone to one form entry schools, or have been, as you say, the only ECT in the whole school. And you'd think in a building where you can have hundreds of people in and out every single day, that being lonely or feeling like you are out on a limb is absolutely impossible, but it's not. And I was very lucky. I had another NQT starting at the same time as me. We were polar opposites. We were so totally different, but we had that affinity because we were NQTs. We'd go on training courses together, and it was really nice to have that other person. And I was very lucky to have a mentor who was very supportive as well. But as you said, there are so many NQTs and ECTs who haven't had that experience at the beginning, and that can be really hard because you almost rely on that interaction with other people. As teachers, we all rely on that interaction with each other and that support from each other to keep us sane half the time, let's be honest. So, as an NQT, if you haven't got, sorry, as an ECT, if you haven't got that, that can be really, really tough.
Yeah, certainly. Now, if you're listening in live, or if you're listening back at the podcast, I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to lay out the show in front of you. This is my teacher aspect. This would be the part at the start of a whole school assembly, maybe with kids there, where I'd be explaining, don't take photos, and where the fire exits are, and all of those things. So what we're going to do, obviously, we're going to be talking about James's wonderful book. But there's some parts in it, some bits that I find really interesting about where the advice and how the chapters are broken up. So we're going to pull through those. But if you are listening live in the Podbean app, you can join in. Okay, we're live. We're Teachers Talk Radio. So you can message in any questions, any comments. Please, if you have something embarrassing, even if you don't want me to share your name, share it. The honesty, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I think some of the candidness and the honesty from the book is really important. But you can text in within the Podbean app if you're listening live. You can, of course, tweet us at TT Radio Official. Tag us in that. We'll see them. We'll read them out. Or you can, of course, if it's very private, DM us your mistake, and I won't read out your name, but we can still share the information. And we're going to run through some of the things that for particularly primary ECTs, but I would say some of this stuff does apply across the board, can where I think definitely going through the book were things that I missed out on advice about. Now, I've mentioned the book a couple of times. When is it out? I've had a sneak peek. I've had a little read through. I was very blessed to have that. So when does the book come out?
So the book is out officially on November the 9th. So we are about 3 weeks away from it, which is, very exciting. And I know you got a digital copy that you got to read this week. You're the first person, Nathan, that has got to read that book, aside from me and the people at Bloomsbury. And the day you got that copy, I got my first hard copy as well. So I've actually got in front of me the first hard copy of the book as well. So very exciting.
Oh, and that must be such a, as a author, as a creative kind of thing. What's it like holding that in your hands now?
Really strange. It's really odd because for me, this book has been emails backwards and forwards. It's been Word documents and PDFs and edits, and it's never looked like a book until it gets into your hands. And that's something I didn't really think about with the whole process. I write each of the chapters I did as a Word document, and I was sitting there totting up the word count as we were going, and it felt like I was just like writing mini essays. And then, to actually have it and hold it as a book, you sort of realise what you've done and what it's come to be. It's very satisfying.
Oh, yeah, I am always impressed by teachers who write books. Not only the fact that you take the time to do it, but also personally, I get tired and give up. I very much like the audio format because it takes work and things, but I can say it, and then once I've said it, I don't have to reread it and go through it and mull over it and all of those things. Edit and improve is not a place for me. But so, what was I guess there's two parts to it for me. For the question is, what was the motivation for you to write the book, and what was the motivation to keep writing it? Because it must have been tough at times.
Yeah, it has been. And funny enough, I'm a bit like you in the fact that I much prefer the audio side of things. So the other side of me, while I've been a full-time teacher, and particularly now that I'm a supply teacher as well, I do media work. So I work in radio and sports broadcasting just to, keep things fresh and for some reason make life a lot harder for myself. But I've always been a big fan of audio as well. So I love podcasts. I love listening, not just because I'm on it today, but to Teachers Talk Radio. And I think in a profession where we talk and communicate with one another, actually having a podcast in my ears while I'm having a quiet half an hour marking it at the end of the day is actually a perfect medium for me. So the book has been a sort of a thing that I've wanted to do ever since I became a teacher. I suppose the motivation for it was when I finished my degree. We went back to university on our final day, and we had what was called the return day lecture. And it was the thing of, you've now qualified, you're going to go out and be these new teachers. We've booked some great guests to come and speak to you. And we had a head teacher who hadn't been in the classroom for 20 years, and we had somebody from a union who had never been a teacher. And we all came away from that lecture and we were like, we weren't very motivated, because we thought actually what we really wanted was someone who had been on the front line relatively recently. And we wanted a reality check, really. We wanted a real perspective on what it was going to be like in September. So that was the feedback that I gave to my lecturers. And so the lecturers at the university I was at were very, very open and very good with that. And she came back to me a couple of months later and said, well, why don't you come in and do the lecture next year then? If you want to make the change, you come in and do it. So I went into Kingston University, did the lecture, and that was when the inspiration came for the book, because I thought, actually, I wonder how many more universities do this sort of thing, and how many NQTs at the time, ECTs now, don't have that sort of humorous but honest portrayal of what it's like in the classroom before we actually go into the front line. And since then, the last 10 years, we have a lot more students now who, coming through the skip route, who learn on the job. But I thought that, having a book and sharing with as many people as I could, far and wide, my experiences and giving tips and anecdotes just gives a little bit more perspective. So that was the motivation behind the book. And then it's taken me 10 years pretty much to write the book, because I have had inspiration so many times, and I've tried writing bits and pieces so many times, and it's just never come together. And teaching full time and doing the other work, I just never had the time to sit down and think, okay, right, I'm going to get into it this evening, I'm going to write a chapter. I didn't even really know what the structure was going to be like to begin with. All I knew is that I wanted to write a book that was going to give new teachers a perspective of what will come, and what you'll experience in the first year. But during COVID, it's the best thing that came out of COVID for me. That first lockdown, we all had a little bit more time on our hands. And that was when it started. I locked myself away for a couple of days and wrote the introduction to sort of get down why I was doing it. And then I started plotting out what chapters I wanted to do. And then I sort of sat on it again for 6 months, and it bubbled away. And then eventually I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I need to get a publisher, and I need them to chivvy me along. So went to Bloomsbury. They picked up the proposal and said, go for it. And I then had 3 months to write 60,000 words while teaching.
Oof.
So,
Yeah.
so that was my motivation in the end, because I'm one of these people who I need a deadline or something, otherwise it just sits in the ether. So yeah, that was the moment when they said, okay, 60,000 words, 3 months to get them done. And it was incredibly tough. It was, evenings and weekends, and my girlfriend didn't really see me a huge amount during those 3 months. But we got to the end of it, and it was a real motivation, and it worked. We got to the point where February this year, the final drafts went in, and again, that was just such a good feeling and a relief to finish the writing process.
Yeah, I bet. And now you are, holding it in your hand, ready to be read by, I imagine, lots, because there is something really special about the book. And I want to kind of ask you just about one of the parts that I think is particularly special, but in the kind of tagline, the title of the book is, do you want to share that with the class? But then there's the subheading, title is honest advice and hilarious anecdotes for primary ECTs. And I wanted to ask you just about that, because there is a really honest and open feel to the book. I remember being an NQT and seeing these experienced teachers and thinking that they had it all together, and some people do act like that, that they have it all together, and when you make a mistake, then I've never made a mistake. So but I really like that honest style of it. I wish I'd had more of that when I was a new teacher. But is that a deliberate style? Is that part of who you are? Why is it written in that way?
Yeah, it really is. And again, I think for me, the idea and the concept of the book, I didn't want this to be a book which was a textbook. I didn't want it to be a book that told teachers exactly what they had to do. I didn't want it to be a sort of a memoir of just what I did. I wanted this to be a book that almost is like a friend that you can carry around and put in your bag, or you can have it on your shelf in your classroom. And it's a book that you can read all at once, or you can dip in and out of when you get to certain points of the year. I wanted it to feel really honest and open, because you're right, you have those teachers, we all have those teacher colleagues who, to them, they don't see when things don't quite go wrong, don't quite go right. And yeah, I think in teaching, when you've got new teachers, you need that honesty. You really want that honesty. And again, going back to that lecture right back in 2014, when I went back in to go and speak to the university students, I spoke to some of my colleagues about what I should say. I was like, I've got an hour, I've got to speak to 100 BA students about, you know, my advice and the reality of the classroom. And one of my experienced colleagues says, do you know what I would do if I'm giving them a real reflection of the classroom? I'd dump 100 books on the front table and just run out crying. And I just sat there and I thought, I quite like the honesty of that. And just the fact that, we're not robots, as much as the children think we just sort of power down or live in a cupboard. We are people who make mistakes. We are human, and that's part of what makes our job so special. So I wanted it to be a deliberate sort of mentor in a book, for those people, as you mentioned earlier on, who might start in a small school or in a school where they haven't got another ECT with them, or having been an ECT mentor now, I know there are weeks when I can't always give my ECTs the huge amount of time that they deserve, and that they need in order to get the best out. And so some weeks it's easier to pick up the book and just think, oh, do you know what, I'm going to turn to that one, and sort of get an honest and hopefully quite funny impression of what it's like. And each of the chapters, I structured them in the way specifically, so each chapter comes in 3 parts, apart from a couple of special chapters at the end, where it starts with an anecdote from my time as an ECT, and then a little bit of analysis, because you've got to have some research and talk about Ofsted and DFE and what the EEF say and all these acronyms, and then there's 5 top tips at the end of every chapter, which sort of say, think about this, consider doing this. So yeah, whatever you need as an ECT, based on something, hopefully the book tries to cover all angles.
Yeah, and I would say it certainly does. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, in a moment, we're going to go through and talk about some of the chapter titles. I don't want to spoil the book for people, so we're going to try. What we'll do is we'll kind of go through them in a slightly different way and talk about why they're hard. But there's a bunch of different topics, events, things that happen within a primary school teacher's year. And that's kind of how the chapters are broken down, and we'll go through some of those titles in a minute. Was there stuff, and I wanted to ask this later on, but was there stuff within these? We're going to go through them. Was there stuff that didn't make the cut into the chapters? Because you say a few chapters and 5 tips for each. There's like 30 chapters at least in here, and that's I tried counting all of the top tips, and I had to give up when I got to 100. I was like, this would be a really good fact for the show. I'll count how many top tips he gives within this book, and but not in an overwhelming way, I should say, for the listener, because it's done in this kind of 5 per topic. But there are things when you wrote it down, and we'll talk about some of these in a minute, that didn't quite make the cut. You thought I could give advice on this, but I'm not going to put it in.
Yeah, I mean, there is there's sort of an alternative version of the book, from where it started off. I'll say that. So when I put the proposal in, I said to the publishers, I'm going to go for 40 chapters, Not all of them will be the top tip ones. So as I said, there's a couple of ones at the end which are sort of quite reflective on my perception of the career, and particularly now that I've been in the career, in the profession a lot longer, I've sort of considered. But the original concept of the book, so it was originally going to be called The Diary of a New Teacher, and it was going to be structured as if it was a school year. So there are a couple of things that didn't quite make it in. Ironically, the first question I got asked when I told some of my teacher friends about this book, because I kept it secret for years, was, have you put anything in there about report writing? And I was like, do you know what? I haven't done a chapter on reports, but I tried so many times, but I couldn't make it funny, which is always hard. Although I've now realised I could have done. But also, there are certain chapters which I couldn't quite condense it down into 2,000 words. And actually, I think I could write a whole nother book on writing reports, because it's there are so many different bits of advice. It's an art and a science, and every school does it differently. So yeah, there are some elements within the school year from that first format that when I sort of changed the tack of the book with the publishers and my editors, some of those chapters came out, but most of the ones that are still in the book now are the ones that were there from the original list.
Okay, well, and that takes us on to a slightly game show here for the show. If you're listening in, so what's going to happen is I have the most of the chapters listed out here, and we're going to run through, because I think some of these will surprise people. Like, there is advice here that I think is really valid that I wish I'd had, and I don't think I've seen advice on this in other books. As a chapter. Which I find really interesting as well. But we will go through, and listeners, you can join in with this as well. If you're at home, or if you want to tweet us in, if you're live in the Podbean app, however you want to do it. I'm going to give you the chapter title, the thing. You can maybe give us, sort of like a brief little kind of narration around it, maybe an explanation why, but you've got to score it from 1 to 10 on difficulty of that task as ECT. And I will also score on whether I think it's difficulty. Obviously, I'm expecting, some of these things are difficult. Some of them slightly more, slightly less, but we will see. And obviously the why will be important. So if you're listening in, you can join in with this. And so the first of the chapters that I've got on my list here, and a difficulty rating and why. Is this difficult? Is it an easy thing to do? Is it one of the most difficult things in the world as a teacher to do, being 10? The night before your first day as a qualified teacher, or an ECT, post training in the classroom, the night before, 1 to 10, easy, difficult, somewhere in between, and why?
So the night before, I really wanted to put this in because I think the night before nerves are, a huge thing for all of us as teachers. For me, I don't think I slept the night before I started teaching, so I would put it right up there as a really difficult thing. I put it sort of an 8. Just trying to get your brain to shut off, but also making the most of when you do have those thoughts at 3 o'clock in the morning, going, oh, I need to do this. So I would say for me, the night before was really difficult. It was a tough moment.
Yeah, me, I would go slightly less, but only because I know the chapters that are coming up. Obviously, I want to save my, a bit like Strictly. I want to save my, so I'm going with a 7 for the night before. I agree with you. I think it's a thing, but I don't think I've ever seen advice for it before in a book where talking about from, that kind of, it is a difficult thing. You're going into a new environment. So the night before, we've gone 7 or 8 on the difficulty scale, but that is in there in the book with 5 bits of advice and some funny stories around it as well. Next on our list, and we have to run through these quite quickly. I've already told this is a jam-packed book, listeners, and as I say, lots of advice in there as well. But there's a lot of different things. So we move on to our next one, which is inset days. And I should remind people, this is as a new teacher we are talking. Put yourself back into the mind. Is an inset day a difficult thing or a more easy thing to do as a new teacher?
I would say inset days for me probably towards the middle. So I'd probably go for a 5 or a 6. I think The hard bit about an inset day as a new teacher is that social aspect of not knowing where to sit, or having to do that awful thing where you stand up and you get introduced to everybody, which is just, you just want the ground to swallow you up. But actually, the listening and the learning bit, you've just come out of training, so that bit is probably not that unfamiliar. But yeah, the social aspect is hard.
I'm surprised with a 5 there. For me, the social aspect, I'd be going higher. I'm like up at an 8 because do you know what I always do? I wear the wrong clothes. I can
Oh
never pitch it
yes.
right. I can never ever pitch it right. Even at a school I've been at a while, like suddenly there'll be some kind of sea change. Everyone wants a promotion maybe, and everyone rocks up in suits to the inset day, and I'm stood
Oh,
there in flip flops. Or I turn up in my suit, which is what I did like my
mm.
first day as an NQT. I turned up there, inset day, and I was in my brand new suit, brand new shoes, tie, everything, and everyone else was there in shorts and t-shirts. And then yeah, so like all of those inset days, I think are hard. And again, it is not something that I've seen advice on.
Mm.
I can't think of another book where I've seen advice on this kind of aspect of how to navigate life as an ECT or an NQT.
Yeah, I
So
wanted to try and get those extra bits and pieces, because you're right. So many books talk about, the mechanics and the normal framework and the bits and pieces you're going to get. But actually, I mean, for me on inset days, and another chapter later on also referenced this, I always take a change of clothes in the car just in case
oh
I've got the wrong day. Because
yeah.
you don't want to turn up wearing jeans thinking it's an inset day and actually it's the first day of term. So yeah, I totally get that, and I mention that in the book because that for me is just one of those things that makes me be a lot calmer about going in on an inset day.
Yeah, no, that is phenomenal advice, and I would tag on there from myself. I can't remember if this is a bit of advice from the book, but take your own food as well. Always have a packet of super noodles or something, just in case, because sometimes they provide food, then sometimes they don't. Then you never know. Then sometimes the food's terrible. Yeah, I always like keep something just in case. And you turn up and the SLT have made bacon rolls or something for everyone. Who knows? Very confusing times, as you say, socially. This is hard stuff to navigate, particularly when you're new to the profession. Okay, this one is probably something that's more commonly talked about, and people kind of side different ways on this. I'm interested in your perspective, but that's the first day with your new class.
I would say my score for first day with the new class, the beginning of the day, I'm probably up near a 9, but it does definitely reduce during the day. And again, I talk about the fact that for me, I had this absolute blackout moment when the children all came in, we given them their lockers, they were sat down in front of me, and I just sort of in my mind went, what do I do now? Like I've not, I wasn't ready for this moment. And so yeah, the beginning of the day was really hard. So up near a 9 for me. But as the day went on, luckily my first day was, really lovely. I got to know the children and actually we had a lot of fun. So it was okay. But yeah, there is a moment of fear when you realise that it's you now and it's your responsibility.
Oh, see, I'm the other way around. I obviously peaked in the other direction because I started off on that first day with a new class. Start off easy because I am in it like 100 miles an hour, and I am showing off and doing everything, and it's like all wonderful. And I've burnt all my energy by break time, and then I've got to continue on. I've got to continue on, and I haven't got the energy because I've hit it too hard, too fast. And run out. If you're just joining us, we are talking about like honest advice and for ECTs, early career teachers, new teachers. And we're joined by James Pearce, the author of the book. Do you want to share that with the class? It's published by Bloomsbury, out very, very soon, and so you'll be able to get it. Very good gift, if you're thinking Christmas. By the way, if you may be listening in, you've got an ECT or an NQT or a trainee teacher. Here's something for that stocking filler or Secret Santa. Just a little tip there for you. Good plug, James.
I like that. I'll be using that one.
Yeah, it's good timing. You see, you've done well here. Get it in your stockings for Secret Santa. On to our next topic, though, and this one probably something that comes up a bit more often. Something that maybe people get right, get wrong. I think people make this maybe harder than it should be. It's marking. As an ECT, is marking down the easier end of the scale or something that's so hard to get right?
I think it's something that's harder to get right. I think it's one of those worries that we all have as an ECT, and when you're new to this, and we're lucky nowadays because I mean, when I started, we had marking policies, but they were all quite vague. I feel there's a lot more of a focus on marking now, and I mean, you even have schools that have got, no marking policies.
Mm.
So I feel that marking now is a little bit of a minefield at the beginning. You've got to get the right policy. You've got to know that one. If you are in a school that does mark, the workload can be big. I see some schools still that do, long comments for every piece of English writing. Um, and it's always something that you do most of the time you do it at the end of the day. So you've had a long day, you're quite tired. So I think marking is something that right back at the beginning for me was up there, probably at a 7. It was something that I found draining, I found tough, and I often would make mistakes at the beginning.
Mm. I think weirdly, it's one of those things where for me, the marking is quite easy in a sense. I found it really hard to stop marking. It's like a bottomless pit. I could sit
Yes.
there and mark forever, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
You
that's the
can,
hard bit.
and yeah, you can, and it's so interesting because since being an NQT, being involved with like marking policies and things, and we've said to teachers, right, you need to tone back your marking, and they just like, I can't, because I just want to give more feedback and more comments. And um, there are weeks I've had before where you get sort of 300 books, or pieces of work to mark a week, and it's just one of those things you can just keep doing and doing and doing, as you said.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's a need for real clarity, and you're right. Schools are getting better at explaining that, like to staff. They're getting better to sort of saying, okay, this is what we mean. This is how much marking. This is what we expect. How often? All those things. Because I trained in a time of triple marking, which was
Oh,
a horrible, horrible time to be carrying books home. And I'm very glad we're not there anymore. And, maybe that
mm,
is an important thing about, we talk about the honesty in this book, the sharing, the challenges that we've all been through. But teaching's cyclical. And I think if we don't talk about the things that didn't work, we're going to end up making those mistakes again.
yeah, I totally agree. In this profession, and we all say it, we all think it when we're sitting in the staff rooms. Things come back around all the time. And I love the days where I'd sit with the teachers who have been teaching for 20 odd years, and this new government initiative comes in, or this new scheme comes in, or this new thing that somebody's heard, and you just hear them go, oh, here we go again, like we've done this 3 times already. You're right, we need to learn from those. We expect the children to learn from their mistakes. We need to do the same, not just individually or in schools, but as a wider career and profession.
Okay, so it leads us on to our next one, and this is a weird one. We might have to pad around to explain what we mean by this title, but questions is the title of the book. Okay,
Mm.
but the chapter isn't about sort of maybe students asking questions, people having questions. It's more from a personal point of having questions, from teacher having questions.
Yes, yeah. We always, for me personally, in the classroom, we're always talking about questioning, and I'm asking the children questions. And I always say to the children, if you're stuck, I want you to ask me if you don't know something. And we all know those children who you feel frustrated sometimes. You're like, why didn't you just ask me the question? But actually, as teachers, we don't always ask for help and ask questions when we should. It would make lives easier. And I think you're sort of either in one of two camps for this one. Either you are somebody who's very confident when you go into teaching and can ask questions, or you're a bit like I was and you didn't really know who to ask or what to ask.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a couple of examples, and then we can talk about like how we're going to score this, about whether we think this is a difficult thing. But in the book, you give a couple of examples of the kind of questions that actually usefully you give some questions to ask. I wish I'd had a list like this, because well, we'll talk about scores in a second of how difficult we think this is. But like, how do I use the photocopier? Where's the staff room? Where are the staff toilets? It's these kind of things. How do I reward a child for doing something brilliant? These are the questions we're talking about. Do you think asking these questions then is something that is hard for an early careers teacher on a scale of 1 to 10. Where are you going to put it? Would James, ECT, NQT, have found this hard?
Yeah, for me, definitely. I would have been comfortable asking my mentor eventually. But yeah, when I started those first few weeks, I mean, that is right up there for me. We're talking 9, if not
Oh,
peaking towards a 10. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
but this is where, like, as I say, when I was looking through the top, counting up the top tips, as I said, in this book, do you want to share that with the class? These top tips, and a lot of most of the chapters have these 5 tips at the end. This one then with a list, maybe over 2 pages of questions that I wish I'd kind of I would take this with me to a new school and just be like, right, have I asked this? I don't need to feel embarrassed about asking this, because there are some really kind of, perceptive questions here, but also things that I just wouldn't even have thought about. There's stuff here that I need. I started in my current school 2 years ago, and I read through the list and went, oh, you know what? I probably should take this into work and ask some of these questions myself as well, because I would be up at 9 or 10 when it came to like asking questions as an ECT. I don't know. Do you think that's like a fear of being seen as not good enough, or a worry of showing yourself up as a fraud? That kind of, teachers talk a lot about that imposter syndrome, don't they?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. When you go into a school, you are working, as soon as you walk through that door and you're a qualified teacher and you're an ECT, you are working alongside classroom teachers who have been in the classroom for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And you're almost seen as equals. To the children, you are all teachers. You
Mm.
all need to have that sort of same sort of level of knowledge, and they expect that you know what you're doing. And I think because we have that every day, when it comes to the moment when you don't know what you're doing, you feel inferior, and you worry that you're not quite getting it right. You don't want to show yourself up. And actually, for me, it was interesting because that chapter came to be not because of my reflection on my NQT years originally. I mean, it came from that eventually when I thought about my experiences. But actually, it was, so I've been on one of my first days as a supply teacher to a school, and being a supply teacher, every time you go to a new school, you feel like that ECT again, because you walk in the door, you don't know where things are. You can't go and use the
Oh, yeah.
photocopiers because they don't give you the code. You know, half of the schools that I go to, I don't know where the staff toilets are. I don't know where the staff room is in some of the big ones. So from that supply teacher experience, I sort of went back to feeling like an ECT again. And I was like, oh yeah, there's all these questions you need to know every time you start in a new place.
Yeah, and I did a couple of years on supply myself, and I found it the most as you say, like very eye opening and very beneficial to be able to see
Mhm.
kind of just these different worlds, because it's not just new teachers, it's moving school as well, isn't it? You can find it so hard. Now there are a lot of topics for us to cover. We're gonna buzz through a few of these quite quickly now. Okay,
Go
so
for it.
staff meetings, difficult, easy, 1 to 10.
Staff meetings, I would say a bit like the course days, relatively easy once you've got the social side of things sorted out. If you deliver them, that's hard.
Yeah. I think but there are good tips in here for getting the most out of them. I think I wasn't as
Mhm.
effective as I could be in both staff meetings and course days, across my earlier part of my career, because it is something to do. But as far as some of the things I found most difficult, there are some big hitters coming up, and I think we need to, as I say, save those high numbers. Getting to know people is one of the next chapters. How difficult is that, and how important is it in finding your feet as a new teacher?
Really important, I think. That is again something that's sort of medium difficulty. I realized I was quite a social person and I got to know people. But it's really easy in a school just to get to know your year team and your mentor and not to get to know others. For me, I realized that actually the office staff are worth their weight in gold, as is your site team and the lunchtime staff who come to you with behaviour every day. So actually, it's getting to know people across the school. Sometimes it's hard to find those opportunities, but it is so valuable to do.
Yeah, I would agree, and it is something that maybe gets parked on the back burner because you've got so many other plates spinning. But it's important that, and there are people who want to help you and can help you, and it's great. We get on to next up though in this chapter is a big hitter. Okay, and I am going to ask you about your early observations, I should say as well. The first observation as a new teacher. How did it go for
Yeah.
you? How were you in those early observations?
I was lucky actually. My first couple of observations went pretty much without a hitch. They went as I wanted them to. Um, which brilliant. It was really, really rad. It was my third observation that didn't go too well, and actually on reflection, I'm so glad that I had one that didn't go well in my first year, because you learn so much more from that. But the over preparation, the constant tweaking of everything, you go into observate that first observation. I went in completely doubting that I could do it, despite the fact I've been teaching for 3 or 4 weeks by that point and had been to university 3 years. That for me, I would say, is probably the hardest moment of the whole of that first year, possibly except one. But yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, I think your first bad observation is probably one of the hardest points in any teaching career. One of my first ones in my NQT year, I'm trying to think if it was my very first one or not. I decided to use computers, right? And you can
Ooh,
probably already hear
right.
where, imagine where this is going. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do something on the laptops, like on the, I think it was pre-Chromebooks, but very similar, small laptops. We're going to get them all out. No one could log on. Half the computers didn't work, and I had someone
Yeah.
standing at the back with a clipboard, and I felt like, the ground is swallowing me up. And do
Mm.
you know what? The ground didn't swallow me up, and I'm still here. Still teaching, and yeah, I think that it's so hard, that first observation. Oh, it's actually giving me tremors thinking about it, to be honest. But there you go. Like, oh my god, yeah, people need support with that, definitely.
Yeah.
We are going to whiz through some things that I think people don't think about, because again, we get back to a few things that maybe I'm trying to. I would say, with the exception of one or two, I don't think I've seen advice on these before, but there is
Mm.
break duty. Okay. And I'm going to group a few together here because
Okay.
in a way they're similar. Okay. Break duty,
Mhm.
school trips, assemblies, and performances, right? So we're talking about kind
Yeah.
of, things where you are working with the wider school, things where you are maybe on show. Uh, if you had to never do one of those things again in your career, just erase it from
Ooh.
teaching, would you get rid of break duty, school trips, assemblies, or performances?
Oh, that's tricky. Do you know? I think out of all of them, I would probably get rid of break duty, as I think most teachers would.
Mm.
Having said that, I quite like the opportunity to go and get a breath of fresh air of a morning, despite the fact it looks like a battlefield out there half of the time, and you're sort of dealing with casualties. Yeah, break duty is probably, I would say, the worst of the four for me.
Yeah, do you know what no one told me about? And this is, maybe something for a future edition of the book. You can say this for version 2 that will come out in a year or so. But I bought my suit in summer, right? And so anyone sort of in the UK currently, imagining
Mm.
doing brake duty or gate duty or whatever it is that you have to do outside, I bought my suit and my shoes in summer,
Um,
expecting to go and be a teacher, and then a month in, and we're underwater and in the rain, and you're potentially walking your kids out to the gate, and for those of you maybe in secondary school listening, or maybe in sunnier climes, so you do have to sometimes stand on the door, or you do have to go out to to the gate. It's not all wet play inside. Yeah, I made a real mistake there. Buy a warm suit in summer. That's my top tip. Add it in. Buy a warm suit in summer.
I like that.
Yeah,
I'll take that, Nathan. Thank you.
we will have that. Now, I do want to pop to the news quickly, but we've got a few more. There are so many chaps in here, and I'm trying to cherry pick some of the ones that I think are. There is so much quality advice in here that I don't want to miss any out, but we will come back just after the news to go through a few more and really delve into why I think this book, is a great read and, a great thing to maybe slip into the stocking of your NQT or ECT, in England as well. We have NQTs here in Wales, you see. We didn't go all that way, but we will see you all. Yeah, the wording didn't change, and so there is still some of us across the border here, but we will see you all on the other side of the news.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
School suspensions featured in The Guardian, always a provocative topic. According to analysis reported in the newspaper, since the pandemic, disadvantaged pupils in England were 3.7 times more likely to be sent home than other pupils. The analysis was published alongside a separate survey of teachers, who said that verbal and physical abuse from pupils had increased significantly post-pandemic. School suspensions have risen overall since COVID, up 30% in 2021 to 22, compared with 2018 to 19, but have gone up more sharply amongst disadvantaged pupils, up 75% versus 4% for non-disadvantaged. The analysis was completed by Who's Losing Learning on the latest available DFE figures for 2021 to 2022. Other groups who saw significant increases were children with social workers and children with special educational needs. The analysis also looked at geographical factors. The increase in suspensions was highest in the East Midlands, up 57%, followed by the North West and North East at 34%. The survey of NASUWT members found almost 9 out of 10 said the number of pupils exhibiting physically violent and abusive behaviours has increased in the last year. Almost 3/4 of those surveyed cited poor socialisation skills following COVID restrictions as a key driving factor behind the rise in poor pupil behaviour. When asked for comment, the DFE said it supports head teachers to take the action necessary to promote good behaviour. The TES reports on further concerns around recruitment of secondary teachers in England. Figures obtained by the NEU and NAHT show ministers are on course to miss recruitment targets by 48%. Numbers in all subjects except history, PE and classics are below the national recruitment target. The figures for last month, the final month before teacher training courses begin, shows there were 13,788 recruits. This is short of the target of 26,360. Paul Whiteman, NAHT General Secretary, said the shortages meant more children were being taught either by teachers with no qualifications in the subject, by teaching assistants, or by supply staff. A DFE spokesperson said there were record numbers of teachers in schools, up by 27,000 since 2010. But unions point out that the number of pupils in state-funded schools had risen at almost double the rate of teaching workforce. Special educational needs has been in the spotlight after reports in the media suggest that the government has signed a contract targeting 20% cuts to the number of new education, health and care plans. According to The Observer, the cuts emerged as councils across England face huge financial deficits on SEND. This is caused by rising demand and long-standing underfunding, they say. Part of the government response has been the launch of the new Delivering Better Value in SEND, which supports councils to bring down budget deficits via early intervention and teaching children with SEND in mainstream schools. The plan's design cost £19.5 million, but it suggests a reduced growth in the number of EHCPs, targeting at least a 20% reduction. Concern has been expressed by SEND campaigners around the legality of such an approach. Ministers have denied that a specific target to reduce EHCP exists, and that it was completely wrong to suggest the DFE is withdrawing support for SEND. Finally, a feature article in The Guardian focuses on research into the impact of pornography on the lives of children and young people. Abby Wright spoke to 10,000 children between 2016 and 2022. They were aged between 6 and 22 and came from a range of backgrounds across the UK. Wright is a theatre designer and did the research as part of the creation of 2 new musicals. The feature article, called Too Much Too Young, is available online, but broad findings suggest that children as young as 6 are encountering porn online, often via pop-ups, but sometimes having been introduced to it by older friends or siblings. For 9 to 11-year-olds, exposure to porn is frequent via platforms like YouTube. Children as young as 12 admitted to feeling like they were addicted to pornography. Teenagers feel that they learn more from pornography than sex education classes, particularly those exploring their sexuality or gender identity. Pornography also appears to confuse the issue of consent, particularly for young women who feel if it is okay in porn, then it's okay in real life. Whatever our thoughts on such a sensitive and challenging topic, it seems clear that relationships and sex education needs to catch up quickly for a lot of young people. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Live from Swansea, this is the Twilight Show with Nathan Gynn on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Borodar Pab, Croeso Abertawe. Hello everyone, welcome to Swansea, welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. And tonight, if you have just joined us, we're joined by James Pearce, author of Do You Want to Share That with the Class? It is a book absolutely crammed with advice and anecdotes for ECTs and new teachers, early career teachers, on some of those things that I think are missing in other books. We've talked through a few of the chapters. In fact, I'm settling very quickly, James, on this idea of it's my my colleague that I needed in my single form entry primary school when I felt very alone 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Oh, it was a long time ago now. In that first year when I needed help and support, because I think that's a very apt description for this book. It's like having someone there. And, one of the questions you sort of started to mention it earlier about this idea that it's almost a reference book, but not quite a reference book. It's something that I could dip in and out of looking for the kind of advice and tips I need.
Yeah, I definitely wanted it to be a book that, as I said, I hope it's something that ECTs can pick up and read all the way through. But then once they've read it once, it's not one of those books that you're going to buy once, read once, and put on eBay or leave it and lose it sort of thing. I hope it's going to be something that actually can stay on the shelf in your classroom or can go in your bag or wherever. And actually, when you get to your first observation or you're on your first course day or whatever, you can sit there and go beforehand, look through and just go, oh, actually, what was it? I need to do from this one, and what can I take away from it? And as you say, if you haven't got that mentor or you're in your one form entry school, hopefully it'll be that sort of extra guide.
Yeah, and I think I would say as well, I found it quite therapeutic in a way of reading through the kind of honest accounts and recounts that actually, if I had a bad, say, assembly, for instance, which is one of the chapters, I could just go and read that part and reflect on that. Actually, some of these things are fairly normal to happen, that we're not all perfect all of the time, every time. And there is advice and support and understanding out there in the profession. I really like that about the book.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it definitely wants to give that reassurance because we're not all perfect, by far from it.
Now, there are a few things in the book that I think, are a bit more hard hitting. I don't know, like, I wanted to ask a couple of those things from the chapters. I know we were going to work through listeners before the show. My plan was we would run through every chapter discussing it. There is so much packed into this book that I'm sure we're not going to get through it. But as well as the lighthearted stuff, there is some more, important messages. I would say some harder hitting topics. So I wanted to ask you about a couple of those chapters. There are chapters in here on things like work-life balance, chapters in here on things like complaints. Did you approach those differently? Do you see them in a different way, or do we still need to see the light and the humour in those moments of teaching as well?
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote the book and when I thought about the year, so it started off almost chronologically in the diary of a year, and then I changed it to be a bit more like a roller coaster because the teaching profession, it's not all highs. And there are those times that actually, even now, 11 years on, there are days that don't quite go so well, and you get one of those harder moments. And it wouldn't be a book that is honest, as I've put on the front, and I stuck by from the very beginning if I didn't mention some of those things. And as a new teacher, I mean, all teachers, we all get complaints, we get gripes from parents, from colleagues, and it's one of those things that actually I wanted to make sure that new teachers were aware that it happens, but provide them with not only reassurance and a story of how it happened to me or what happened to me when it happened, but also, provide some tips and tell them that there is something coming up afterwards. Things will get better, and try to provide a little bit of light in there. Because again, all of us who have been teachers and had to deal with complaints or those tough days when you do have a bit of burnout because it's been a really, really busy week, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Certainly. And I think you're right. It wouldn't be honest if it didn't have those shades of, the dark and the light that comes with teaching. Because there is, I was a primary teacher for a very long time. I now teach secondary, and there are people talk to me about the differences and the things I miss. And I reflected, and there are chapters within the book about. I know some people do still run clubs at secondary, but it's maybe less so than in primary, or maybe in a slightly different way. But things like the cake sales, the residential trips, the wet playtimes, the summer fair, and there is something particularly joyous about primary teaching, I think.
Oh yeah.
And so when we look through those things, I wanted to ask you, you've talked about it being originally possibly being the concept of a year. How did you find as an ECT? Do you think there is a natural flow to the year? Are there, these natural high points? And for you, which are your favourite parts of the primary school year?
Definitely. I mean, it's so funny because even now, so after all of these years, I still have the sort of the dips and the tough bits. So, for example, this part of the year for me has always been one of the hardest. When you get to the end of that first half term, the nights are drawing in. You, as we said earlier on, you start strong at the beginning of the year and you get exhausted. This is always one of those parts for me that's always been quite tough. But you have those good ones as well. So residentials, the first school that I worked in, I was full time for 8 years. All of the year groups went to residential, which sounds chaotic, but it was such a nice opportunity to get to see the children in a different environment, to really see them, as young people, and actually to go and have some fun and enjoy yourself as well, and abseil off of things. The cake sale was very similarly. It's a good opportunity to go and meet the parents and be part of the school community. And I think most of those opportunities, we talk about the teaching standards, and 1 to 7, very important, but actually that teacher standard 8 and you're being part of the wider school. For me, those were the moments that actually I found the most satisfying. Because as much as I love being a teacher and being in the classroom and seeing those light bulb moments of children, and imparting what I know and everything from the national curriculum into the children and getting those good results, it's being part of the school community that to me has always been my favourite part of being a teacher. And yeah, so for me are always the highlights in the school year.
Yeah, I agree. There is something joyous, particularly, at the Christmas times, at the Easter times, the summer terms
Yeah.
as well. When you get to see people coming into the school, whether it be parents, carers, grandparents, all of those kind of things, and class assemblies, of course, probably the most stressful thing, a class assembly for secondary school colleagues who maybe don't have children of their own who've been through primary school. A class assembly is the most traumatic thing, I would say, that a
Oh yeah.
primary school teacher has to do. So in a sense, I don't know how to explain it, James. How would you explain a class assembly?
You're right. To somebody who's never seen one or experienced it, they just will never know. But yeah, a class assembly, um, essentially, it's a sort of showcase of a topic, really. And usually, you do it about something that you've learnt in class. Although some of mine, as I mentioned in the book, have been on weird and wonderful topics. But it's an opportunity for the children for about 10, 15 minutes to go out there and sing songs and do little skits and read things off of a bit of card that talk about a subject. But as you say, it takes way longer than you think to rehearse it. If you've made the mistake, as I always did, of writing it yourself, that always takes time. And then, as I've had before, I don't think I put this in the book. I can't remember now, but I had one class assembly one year where we'd gone through, we'd finally got it right the morning of the assembly. The assembly was in the afternoon. We're just about to do it, and one of the parents turned up late. And as the parent walked in the door at the back of the hall, the child just burst out into tears. And I'm just sitting there going, they are literally saying the first line. And they've just started crying out. I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? Yeah, it's stressful, but so rewarding. And you do sit there at the end of it with a smile on your face.
Oh yeah, you like, and the kids get a lot out of it, and the parents also, they love it, get a lot out of it. But you sound like the teacher that I would hate, the one who like has put on a National Theatre worthy West End show, and I've got my class assembly next week, and
Oh yes.
everyone's just seen an all singing, all dancing West End performance, and I know I've got my show coming up, and you've just outplayed me.
I know. I always used to ask for mine in the autumn term because at my old school it used to get very competitive, and by the time you get to spring, obviously you've got BAFTA award-winning assembly. It was ridiculous. So yeah, mine always went early because I was not entering that.
Well, yeah, a good tip there in itself. But it does lead us on to one of the other things that we've talked about, the stuff that is pedagogy, the stuff that is organizational, even the things that are around the aspect of teaching. But there are a number of chapters where you've pulled out that particularly new teachers will find difficulties, and they relate to other staff, whether socially, such as things like staff nights out, but also, I mean, I suppose it is still socially about a kind of juxtaposition between young staff, older, experienced staff, and the different job roles within the school. I can't say, I think the only advice I had as a trainee teacher on that was don't sit in someone else's chair in the staff room. And I don't think that covers it by far enough. And luckily, you have a few chapters talking about these different aspects.
Yeah, schools are so interesting because you get so many different types of people. I mean, you think about the children are different and the parents are different, but actually, the staff you get in a school, you're always going to have the member of staff who's been teaching for decades and is still very enthusiastic, and you usually get the one who's very experienced and less than enthusiastic. Is counting down the days to retirement. You will get ECTs and newer teachers who are giving everything a go, and those that, what, they're just trying to keep their head above water. Um, it's very interesting. For me, the best thing that I thought with that is that when you go into schools and say there's a chapter on young versus old, not only do you have teachers that are older than you, and of course, not all ECTs are 21, 22 coming out of university. The NQT that I had with me, she was in her 40s, I believe, and was a mum of two children. And there was me, a 21-year-old, and her in her 40s. And it was a very interesting juxtaposition of the two of us. But what I used to say to my colleagues, particularly when one of my year group partners said, "I'm actually old enough to be your mum," and then some. I said, the thing is that we're all older than the children. And it doesn't matter how, how many years we've been teaching or how old we are or this, that, and the other. To the children, we're all old. And to us, the children are all young. And that was one of the things I thought, actually, I am on the same level of them. But it is hard to sort of gauge people. And there are opportunities to rub people up the wrong way when you go in there, as you say, sitting in somebody's seat and sort of getting into the swing of how the school works. It can be tricky, but you get there.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I found hardest, particularly early on, is this, this idea that actually everyone brings something different, don't they? You talk about the old and the experienced teachers, the kind of maybe people who are, thrusting go-getters who one day will be a head teacher, and people who just want to enjoy the classroom practice of teaching. And I think once you can see that, that balance, that everyone's bringing something slightly different to the team, it really starts to settle in. But certainly, yeah, the staff interactions can certainly be a tricky thing to navigate, which is why I'm so pleased there's some different chapters on the different aspects of that within the book, which I should say again, I keep trying to make sure that I shout out the title for anyone who's listening, but it is do you want me to share that in the sorry, let me get it exactly right. Do you want to share that with the class? Hilarious anecdotes. Honest advice and hilarious anecdotes for primary ECTs, and it is out on the 9th of November. You can pre-order it now from such places as that famous one that's named after a rainforest, but there are other places, of course, that you can get it, so that you can add it to your basket now, so that it comes straight to you when it's ready. There is a bit, I think, that we haven't lived up to, James. This is where we if we haven't lived up to within the show, if we don't cover it, okay?
I know where you're going with this. I've got a
hilarious. We have done the funny. We have done the advice. Honest anecdotes. I think we haven't hit the nail on the head just yet. And I will share. And what this will do is I will share first, and it will put you on the spot then to have to share something. And if you're listening in, feel free to share in. I'm not sure this is necessarily hilarious, but it is an honest anecdote of possibly the most face palm thing that I ever did. And this was as a NQT or an ECT, as they've now been named. But this is my most embarrassing moment that I did. Is I was doing a topic on the Aztecs. Was it Aztecs? Incas. Topic on the Incas.
Oh, yeah.
And very common. I think it was year 5, and we had ancient civilization. So our topic for that half term was the Incas, and I'd done some of the different bits and pieces. We'd covered off quite a lot. And someone suggested to me that we make hot chocolate, and hot chocolate, allegedly, apparently, I had to do a little bit of research. That was one of those things that came from that part of the world. It was something that they did. And so this is fine. And on the morning that I am due to make it, and I was inexperienced and young, and I should add into this, I'm not a cook. I do not cook. I do not know anything about cooking. I don't know anything, right? And on the morning of me doing it, the deputy head came in and gave me a bag full of peppers, chili peppers, right? Because apparently, again, these were a thing. So she gave them to me, but I didn't have a lot of guidance and instruction for this. And I just gave them to the kids, right? I gave the kids these chili peppers, and we were making hot chocolate, and they just started, rubbing them, touching them, chopping them up and putting them in their cups of hot chocolate, then touching their eyes, their mouths, drinking the hot chocolate. And I pretty much had a hazmat incident on my class where we had to get milk and parents, and some of them were off with stomach upsets the next day. And honest to God, that is the most facepalm thing I have ever done in my life as a teacher. Traumatic for everyone involved, I should say. Poor children that I taught. But yeah, I don't know what the outcome of that is. Maybe, do your own research would be a good piece of advice there. But I have shared, so it cannot be worse than that. I effectively am admitting that I poisoned 30 9-year-olds. Okay, so I have put it out there. So that now leaves the door open for you to share your most face palm moment with us. First of all, reactions. That happens to everyone, doesn't it? Come on, make me feel better. That's perfectly normal. Poison a bunch of children.
Yes, I have definitely heard of that one before. It's a bit like the class assemblies. How am I supposed to follow that?
Yeah. Well,
That is such
the
a
thing
good
is,
moment.
it can't be worse. Literally, I poisoned some children. So
Yeah. I hate to break it to you, Nathan. That's not a great one.
So what it means is, though, make some ECT. There might be ECTs listening to us now. They might be listening back on a podcast. They might be thinking about buying this book. They've probably had an awful week. James, make them feel better. We've all been there, haven't it? We've all done something silly.
Oh yeah, we've all done things, and I mean, for me, there has been so many moments over the years where, or particularly as an ECT, where you teach the wrong thing, or you say something wrong, or I mean, I've fallen over in front of the children before, tripped over a chair leg and gone completely over, and the children just sit there laughing while you're trying to, help your bruised ego. But my most embarrassing one, which is in the book actually, and still haunts me to this day, is I was sitting at the front of my class. In the front of my classroom, I had a couple of those tray units, where children's trays are. And I'm sat down on this tray unit, and I sort of put my hands on top of the tray unit and tucked my fingers into the tray. So I was like holding on to the edge of the tray unit. And what I didn't realize is that one of the children had put their tray in back to front, and by doing so had managed to wedge their tray into the unit. And I had somehow, where I had my hands over the edge, managed to wedge my hand into the tray. So this sort of minute, perch at the front of the classroom in the middle of a lesson, I then realized I couldn't get my hand out and I couldn't stand up. So I'm trying to style it out, and I'm sort of like, okay, trying to teach, and children are asking me questions, and I'm calling this across the class. It then ended up with me having to get someone to go to the office because I could not get my hand out of this tray, and I was stuck into this tray unit with my hand. To which the office lady came down, Becky, a good friend of mine now, and she just laughed, and the kids all laughed at me when they realised what was going on, and I was mortified.
Oh my God! I actually think that is one of my favourite. That is just being trapped in it. Now, just to add flavour to the story, was it a child or an adult you had to send to the office?
I had to send a child to the office.
Oh, that makes it even better.
Yeah.
Some poor child has had to go up to this. My teacher is stuck. That is brilliant.
I know.
I do love that. But
even worse, it was my right hand as well, so I couldn't even write a note to send with the child. I literally had to say to them, can you just go to the office and explain that I need someone to come down because my hand is stuck in the trays? And they just were like, what? Yeah, it was awful.
But if you are listening in and you're an ECT, if you're listening in and as an experienced teacher, these things happen. You're not wrong about chairs collapsing. I've done that. I've been the teacher sat in an assembly when there's chairs on the side and the chair broke and I collapsed whilst in the middle of an assembly. That happens. If you're an ECT, that happens. That's normal. That will happen.
Yeah.
That happens. You will throw a ball or kick a ball on the yard. It might be during PE. It might be just during break time. You will, hit a child in the face or back of the head with a ball by accident. That will happen.
Yeah.
These are all things that will happen. They don't show it on the Get Into Teaching adverts, do they? But these are definitely things that will happen, and will you will feel terrible about. In fact, a lot of these things, as we go through, we've gone through the chapters of the book. There were things and yeah, that night before chapter at the start, I think is really important, and that mental well-being aspect of us reflecting and the tips, because all of these things are terrible at the time, and now we're sat here 5, 10, 15 years later laughing about them, and we have some perspective on it, but some of this stuff does feel really bad at the time, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. And, if you are in a situation where you're getting close to half term or it's been a tough week, then some of these moments that we are literally laughing about now, honestly, can tip you over the edge sometimes, and you can go home thinking, oh, I just can't do this anymore. And that was why I wanted to put them in the book. We talk about, and it mentions in there the stat of sort of 1 in 8 new teachers don't make it to the end of the first year. And I was like, well, actually, if we talk about the fact that we all have these moments and these mistakes and these embarrassing minutes, well, maybe that will just convince a few more people that it's okay and just help them to get through it.
Yeah, and I definitely think that. I think the whole vibe from the book, the impression I got, this kind of supportive, as we've already mentioned, this, a colleague or a friend there with you, a mentor who maybe you didn't have or wasn't there, or maybe you couldn't share with, because that would have been the thing for me. I had that thing where I didn't want to admit failure to my mentor, because I felt that they
Yeah.
were judging me and doing my observations. And so having this to kind of go home with and reflect on and look back through, I think is such a useful thing and an important thing for early careers teachers to help them get to the stage where maybe we are in the career, where we can laugh a little bit at it with a little bit of perspective of time. I have a final question for you, and this kind of relates to, well, it could be anything, because it's a very open door question, this one. So apart from your book, obviously the book is an important thing, but what do you think every ECT needs? Now, if you're working with an ECT at the moment, if you have one in your school, from us experienced teachers, what do ECTs need from us?
It's so funny because there are so many things that I think I'd cross over with the children. I mean, the first thing that I think all ECTs need is patience. I know as experienced teachers, we have got many plates spinning, and I've supported ECTs and skit students in the past while leading a subject and leading a year group and doing this, that, and the other. But actually, they need our time and our patience. Um, they will make mistakes. They will need the time to ask questions, and we need to give that to them. They need humour themselves and also from us. It makes it so much easier when you start a mentor meeting with a smile and can fit a laugh in there along the way. They need to have reassurance, just like, again, we'd say with the children, they need to know that they're doing well. But at the same time, and I've seen this from some mentors in the past, they need to have somebody who is going to be honest with them and say when something hasn't quite gone right, but deliver it with a next step and some support. Do it in the right way so that you can say, a lesson didn't quite go well today. I might have tried this. I'll tell you what, come and watch me try that and see what you think. Um, they, but also, I suppose you need to have that flexibility with ECTs because every ECT is very different. You have some who have that confidence and really do want to go for it, and then you need others who might need a bit more hand holding. But yeah, patience, I would say, humor, a mentor that listens and works with them, supports them, but is honest, and you know do what you can. At the end of the day, I always felt privileged if I was given the opportunity to mentor someone, because not only was the school investing in this new teacher, but they were investing me to give them the time and the support and training to get them up to where we would expect them as a school. So yeah, for me, I never saw it as a burden. I saw it as an honour, and still do now.
Yeah, you're so right. It is, bringing these people through, and you're right when you mention the percentages of those maybe who haven't made it in the past, and we need to do something about that as a profession. And I think certainly what you're doing with the book is going to help with that. I'm just going to give a shout out because you have tweeted out. If people want to find it, there is a discount code. Do you want to do a little kind of last bit plug for the book? Tell them where they can get it. And, obviously you've tweeted out a little message for a discount code there as well.
Yes, yeah. So the lovely people at Bloomsbury, who have been amazing, I've got to say, the whole team there, they let me know today that if you buy the book between now and the 9th of October when it comes out from Bloomsbury themselves, then you can use a discount code, which is JPearce, Pearce, it's my surname, 35, and you get 35% off the book, which is quite a good, sizable saving. You can also get it on Amazon. You can get it on Waterstones as well at the moment. But yeah, Bloomsbury at the moment, I've got that 35% off code, JPearce35.
Yeah. And, if you're listening back or don't know how to route your podcast, check back on our TT Radio tweets or follow James, who's at James JP Pearce on Twitter. You'll be able to find that tweet in there somewhere in the comments about this show, and you'll be able to find that code because, yeah, when I say it's packed full, it has, as I said earlier, so much advice in it. I lost counting the much of advice in here, but set out in a very easy to use way. And very reassuring, which is what I felt I needed as an ECT. So, yeah, congratulations on the book. As I say, I very much enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you for being so positive and supportive about it as well. It's always nice once you've got the book out to hear people saying that you think the ideas didn't just sound okay in my head, they work for you as well. So, yeah, really appreciate your time this evening.
No, thanks for coming on. Now, if you are listening to us live, don't forget, you can switch over to Spaces on X, which used to be called Twitter, and you can join the Education Tonight dates with Brent and Adam, who'll be starting on there in the next couple of minutes once they go live. Thank you for listening in. That book again that we've been talking about is Do You Want to Share That With the Class? Is by James Pearce, and he's been a wonderful guest tonight. Thank you, James. Nostar, we say here in South Wales, which is good night. So Nostar.
Nostar to you as well, Nathan.
Oh, fantastic. A lovely bit of Welsh to end on there. It's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. And listeners, go out there, get the book. And yeah, if you know an ECT, believe me, this is something that they need in their lives and it will help them. So good night from Teachers Talk Radio. We'll see you next time here on The Twilight Show. Good night, Nostar.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.